and very, very pleased to see you all here this evening. We've got visitors from around the world here today, from Paris, Chicago, Parma, Barcelona, but also the length and breadth of Britain. And it's really fantastic to see so many people here. If you're wondering where you are, this is what used to be the gym of the old Bretton Hall College. So it hasn't been used for a few years, and it's a little bit tatty around the edges. But it was really the only way that we could cope with the demand for people wanting to hear Jaume speak tonight. I guess it's not so surprising that there's been such a demand for tickets, because this has been a really extraordinary exhibition for us. We've known Jaume since 1998, and of course know his work, and we felt for a long time that we could do something special here, but also that his work would have a kind of a communication with a UK audience. But we haven't really been prepared for how it's been over the last few months. At the moment, over 150,000 people have been through the Underground Gallery alone. And the show has had accolades from around the world in the media and from our colleagues as well. So the numbers have been extraordinary, but I think more important is the quality of experience that people have had in the exhibition, or certainly that many people have had in the exhibition. It's sometimes really scary when you see a big group of kids or young people going into that space, into the Underground Gallery, and you see them with all their energy and their lack of care and, they're just gusto. But it's really interesting for us, because what we've noticed is there is a kind of a slowing down, even of little children and very robust teenagers, so that by the time they're coming out of the gallery, there's, not exactly a silence, but there's certainly a kind of a quietness around them and a thoughtfulness that they didn't have before they went into the space. And for us, it's been fantastic listening to the kind of conversations that people have had in the galleries and outside in the sculptures around the gallery. And I think it's one of the things that really I love most about Jaume's work, because he allows a kind of a place for communication and connection between people, or even just connection with yourself. His work is very much about humanity. It's about our incredible limitations and our vulnerabilities, but also the possibilities of humanity and our potential, and perhaps our unrealized potential. So what you see, or what we've noticed, is a connection between people and these very visceral and physical and earthy works, which allow a kind of a transcendence, a way for people to come out of themselves and to consider the world and themselves in a slightly different way. So you haven't come here to listen to me. I'll shut up. I'm very pleased to introduce Jaume to you. He's a very, very busy man. He's going around the globe in a sort of crazy way, doing incredible projects, and he's going to show some of those to you tonight. There will be a question and answer session at the end, if any of you have any questions. We also have some books that have been signed, if you would like to get those, or Jaume will do a bit of signing afterwards, depending on the amount of time we have available. So I'm pleased to introduce Jaume Plensa.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Claire. When Peter Marley and Claire invited me to do that show, it was such a beautiful, opportunity for me to try to develop a dialogue between my Mediterranean tradition and this park, which I guess is one of probably the most beautiful British traditional landscape design. And I guess it was working pretty well. I'm very pleased with the show. And why? Because probably everybody in the world is dreaming about the same in one or another context. When I was preparing my lecture, choosing images for this evening, I was doubting to introduce shots from the show or not, because I suppose all of you, more or less, visit already the exhibition. But I decided to introduce the shots of the show because I guess it would be much easier for all of us to understand how all those pieces are linked to different families of my work. More or less, we will talk tonight about the last 10 years of my work, which starts with the Crown Fountain in Chicago. You probably remember that the city of Chicago did a quite ambitious park, call it Millennium Park, and they invite several people to do projects. My project was based about water. The idea that water is probably the most important part in our lives, the sense of humidity. As you know, normally a fountain is something a little bit part of decoration. You never have the possibility to interact. But in my case, I wished really using water to do an homage to people living in town. Finally, the piece was like a conversation, and with, well, as you know, every time that we are talking with somebody, it's a beautiful and magnetic emptiness in between both of us. This kind of a space that sucks everything around, an amazing energy. It was the idea in my project. And was filled up with water. It was just a reflecting pool, shallow water, just 3 millimeters, and where people were invited to walk on, and using the faces of people from Chicago, 1,000 faces, filmed in video, as gargoyles, spouting water from their mouth. This idea that I'll give you life. The same way that we are talking, words are life, it's a way to communicate. Water in some ways is a little bit the right media. And those projections, those LED screens with the faces were changing regularly, introducing in a random way the different faces inside. This homage to the anonymous, this idea that what is a city? A city is layers and layers of generations growing up something, a dream. Call it, in that case, Chicago, but could be anywhere in the world. And obviously, the first fans of that piece were kids. And I still remember with the manager of the project, the guy who helped me with all the technical team, we decided to take out the fence which protecting a little bit the working areas in the fountain, and suddenly from I don't know where, kids arrived immediately to play with my piece. I have to say that I've been working around 4 years in that project, and the first years were a little bit complicated because the municipality was quite afraid that my piece was too intellectual, too much technology, a little bit too distant from the normal people using a park. And instead than that, it was completely the opposite. Probably it's the most physical, the most interactive piece that I never did before, thanks to kids. Kids really understood immediately the project. That means a place for freedom. And they really calculate the timing of the gargoyles, and they were waiting in front of the faces when was the moment where the shower starts. And it was really moving. Every time that I'm in Chicago, and to see how they enjoy water is really a pleasure, because contemporary art is not necessarily something a part of the everyday of one society. And that piece really interact very strongly with the normal life of people. Any kind of people. It's, the piece becomes on a stage, and when people decide, you see, well, I guess, wait a second, you see that is the dry part and the wet part. When they really decide to pass from one side to another, they start to smile. And I think that it's something extraordinary in that project. Well, it's a gathering place. People just enjoy to meet there and just sit and to see others playing with the water or playing themselves. I think it was really the way to accomplish a dream. Many times when you have a commission of a piece, you are thinking what is the most appropriate piece for that site, for that specific site. Chicago is probably one of the cities with the most extraordinary artistic and architectural tradition. And it was really a crazy responsibility for a young artist to be invited to do a new piece there. You find all your relatives, in that place, Miro, Picasso, Calder, Oldenburg, everybody's there. That means it's the way when you visit the house of your grandfather, that everything is filled up of history and quality. And they said how I could link with that amazing tradition. And I guess that piece is opening an extraordinary new possibilities in the public space. That means that technology is not something that we should be afraid about it. Well, you can imagine the municipality was a little bit concerned about passing water through LED screens, which is electricity. Many things, many technical aspects we should invent it at that time, but I guess when you see all the people around, it's really a beautiful pleasure. You probably know also that project. It was a piece that I did in the roof of the BBC some years ago. It's a piece that called Breathing, and it's in the new building in the end of Regent Street in Lagan Place. Well, I just changed the concept. That church, which is Old Soul Church, the old building, and that is the new art. And I decided to use the same shape of the spire in the church, but upside down. That means, let me go back. At that time, the spire was a little bit like a microphone for God to talk with man. And I said that today we have the possibility to turn about and to talk with him in a similar conditions. And the one part of the spire is coming inside the building as a concept that people could really talk with divinities. And I just did the text etched around the glass, which is talking about the idea of silence. When you take a glass in your hands and you just turn your finger around, it produces this beautiful sound, which is just the vibration of the material, a little bit like my gongs. And that is the vibration of life. Our bodies are vibrating and communicating, and that is a beautiful view from above. And every night at 9:30 more or less is the light beam coming up that links with other family of my works that I started in 1990 working with light beams. I did one also in Gateshead for Baltic, that in London, in Auge, in the southwest of France, and in Jerusalem. We were talking before the lecture that in Jerusalem, as you probably know, is a kind of a sound announcing the beginning of the Shabbat, but it was nothing to announce the end. And I have a light beam announcing that every Saturday evening. Okay, that is something closer. And that is a beautiful view of the Westminster landscape. That is another project that I did. I finished last year in Japan. It's a beautiful island, call it Ogijima, and they invite me to do a place, a little pavilion to welcome visitors. It's a very famous island that in the spring is completely packed with flowers, and people love to take the ferry and visit the place. And I did that little pavilion. It's a very tiny pavilion, very beautiful, surrounded by water as well. And people could walk around and inside, and I did the roof using lettering. You know, one of the materials that I'm using pretty often is poetry or different alphabets, lettering. And I like it to imagine that we have the protection of different cultures, that they are very well expressed in their own alphabets. That is a beautiful view that you can see my little project in conversation with the little islands all around this beautiful place. And in the sunset it's great, but in the evening it's very beautiful because you can understand pretty good the project, because the roof is reflecting on the pool, and that is the main idea. My intention was to try to represent the best idea of home, which is an oyster, no? Which is the two sides of the shelf. One is physical existence and the other is just a reflection on the water. That's me walking in. And that is the idea that's protecting. That the shadows are very important. Normally in my work I'm using pretty much this idea of shadows, which link a little bit with my work with curtains. We have here at Yorkshire this beautiful curtain, 58 meters long, which is a mix of different poets. And that was the same curtain installed in another museum before, in a different way. It's the same. And I like that picture because it represents pretty well my intention. When I was a child in my country, many stores had metal curtains to avoid the insects went in. Probably it was the same over here. And I never forgot the sound, ling, 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 when I went with my mother to visit those stores to pass through. Okay, I guess I always thought that poetry has this amazing capacity to protect our lives from insects, whatever. And I like it to represent poetry as those kind of curtains that were in the entrance. And you had always to take the decision to pass through, like this guy. When you really decide to pass through, you take a serious decision. And also, another aspect of those curtains, that was a show in New York, with, mixed in another way, like a cloud. It's that, I don't know if you have the same problem. Every time I have a book in my hands, I'm desperately curious about the backside of the letters. What's happened with the backside? You only see one side. What's happened with the other? And I like it to take those letters out of the paper or the screen in the computer and to see the backside. And as you know, in a sculpture, we love the complete view of an object. And it's quite depressing when the letter only see one side and what's happened with the other. And with my curtain, that was in Dallas at the National Sculpture Center, install it in a quite similar way that we did over here, but much smaller. That you see, it seems that in the wall in Jerusalem, when people are thinking and in front of the poetry, that you can read in vertical. Well, poets, I don't know, you probably know that I'm in love completely with William Blake, for example, or Shakespeare. I had the good luck to read them very young, and immediately I thought that we were not so far. I suppose that if those guys were here, they were enjoying the same ideas like us today. And that is one of the images from here, from Yorkshire. Look at this beautiful idea that lettering are protecting at the same time is making really a kind of filter of life from one or another side. Okay, talking about poetry, William Blake, for example, William Blake said something extraordinary one day. He said, "One thought fills immensity." That idea was always in my mind because I feel that the sculpture is very close to that concept, because one sculpture is not a problem of one object. It's something more. It's something that should vibrate, that should expand an energy and fill up the space, not necessarily with physical elements, but with that kind of energy that some people have. And I remember when I was a child going with my parents to concerts, I remember that I was always fascinated with the guy with drums. And he was sitting in a corner in the orchestra doing nothing, and suddenly he just wake up, talk, and sit down again. And I love that, because I guess a sculpture is not far, but the importance is to really hit the drum or the gong in the right moment. And I guess that those pieces is my homage to William Blake and this idea of the guy who is playing drums, in the way that when you beat the gong, all the cosmos is in the same moment, you and the cosmos, because you decide this moment. And I've been using the text from a Song of Songs. Well, probably you read the text. It's a text from the Bible that I've been reading when I was a child, and I thought I understood, but not at all, because when I read again and again, I guess it's one of the most sensual and erotic poems that nobody did before. And it's this amazing moment that a woman in love is looking for her lover in the walls of Jerusalem, walking up and down. And she's plenty of ideas in her mind, but everything is mental. And like the vibration of that material, you probably try yourself, you probably play the gongs in the show. And when you beat the gong, the vibration passes to your body, and you, the gongs, and the wall as one. You know, this idea of totality. And that is the installation. John T. did wonderful shots of the installation. And in that case, I did something special. I did the installation as a circle, as a clock. We miss only one gong, like a gate to go in. It's like the walls of Jerusalem. It's the idea of time also, 12, but less one. And this idea that somebody is trying to listen, this secret vibration of material, I think is wonderful. Okay, that is part of the same family. Instead in the gongs that you decide when to beat the gong, in the cymbals, it's a drop of water, it's a droplet falling down from the ceiling regularly every 8-10 seconds, beating the cymbals with poetry of William Blake as well. And I did many installations, and it's very beautiful because it's a very subtle sound, and when you walk through, you pass from one sound to another in a very beautiful way. Okay, this idea of circularity, that I did also in that installation that I did 2 years ago in Dubai for the, well, you probably know, the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. They asked me to do, well, the entrance lobby for the building, and I decided to represent with all my symbols all the countries in the world. I guess it's 193 countries in the world. And everyone, as far as made by hand, has a different vibration. Could be subtle, but it's different. It's the same like human beings or countries or cities, wherever. We are slightly different, and that I think is very nice. And then it drops of water are beating my cymbals and producing this very gentle sound in the entrance of the lobby. It's a quite beautiful piece because it's very organic in this kind of tremendous building, which is 818 meters tall. It's amazing. And the piece is about 15 meters tall as well. You can probably see a human figure over here. It's the concierge. Just, well, that is another way to work in this idea of circle. That is a project that we did on the snow with Norman Foster when it was the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games in Sestiere in Italy. And we collaborate together in a project to work in the snow. And I had always this idea to try to do a geographic portrait, a portrait that could represent pretty well the landscape, but like music with notes or like poetry with words, just with a stamp. And I've been using the numbers of GPS, you know, that it's quite precise. And then I did the position of my studio in Barcelona, the position of Norman's studio in London, and the position of the site in Italy, in Sestiere. Obviously, it was a piece that, well, I guess we opened the show on Tuesday, and probably on Saturday was already melting. I mean, but I guess it was a beautiful attitude. I remember in the text that I did at that time, I said it is a way to kiss the landscape, like a kiss, a stamp, boom. And it was very beautiful, especially in the evening, illuminated. Well, I guess the dark figure over here is Norman. And it was very magic. It was really a beautiful project. Okay, following that idea of light in the evening, it's all those kind of sitting figures, this kind of human shapes that has light inside. Many times I've been thinking about what is the relationship about body and soul. I'm not religious at all, but I hope we have something more than muscles and liquids. I think we have, I don't know, a kind of energy, whatever you can say. And many times I like to imagine that we have inside a kind of light moving. And I did many of those figures, like in the entrance of the park, which is sitting on top of a pole. That is in Paris, facing the streets, this kind of figures. Or in that case, this kind of very fat angels. I said like that, fat angels. Angels that represents pretty well our life, because we are too fat to fly. But even with our default, we have the capacity to illuminate life. I like to use this kind of imperfection, no? And those angels going out from the wall. That was in Tokyo, for example, or that I guess was in Malaga, in the museum in Malaga in Spain. Or that is here, no? In that case, I've been using the idea of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, which is something that I like very much because it's quite ambiguous in the concept, because it seems that you are a part of the problems of society, or that you are thinking about your interior, not necessarily talking, not necessarily hearing, not necessarily seeing, but feeling, which it's also very important. And they have a lot of concepts of psychiatric ideas. That is the same family of the piece in the entrance of the park. I've been working a lot, many years about those figures, because you probably remember the history of Estilites, which was a group of people living in Constantinople, that they decided to live a part of society, and they use all columns, all buildings, to living up, and then they look at from above, like birds, what society was doing below. And I liked this idea that they are watching out and trying to protect us in this kind of strange way. I'm calling more or less this kind of pieces conversations, because it seems that they are talking not with words but with colors. Colors are changing. That is a picture, but they are gently changing. I'm sorry, that was in Jacksonville, in Florida, it's a permanent piece, and that is in Nice, in south of France. And it's a similar concept. And during the night, they have this magic mix of colors. In the day, they are much more quiet and distant. And I like also because birds love my pieces. You see that it's always, you see, I remember the mayor was very concerned about that, because they are seagulls and they're a little bit dusty, honestly. And just 5 minutes after to install the pieces, each man or each figure had one. And it was fantastic for me, because in former times, in primitive cultures, people liked to imagine human beings like birds, because they said that a bird is like a human being born on earth, but with the possibility to fly. He's flying with his wings, we are flying with our ideas, but it was a metaphor of human beings. And I liked it that immediately it was one bird in each of my pieces. He was very disappointed because it was a little bit dusty, but I love that. Okay, and that is here. It's a piece, unfortunately the park ends at 6 and sometimes it's not as dark as necessary to enjoy the piece. But now that the show extends until end of January, I guess, in winter it will be darker before, and we probably could see better the piece. Beautiful shots, beautiful place. And I like it to show you that picture. It's also in the catalog. That picture, I took that picture in Milwaukee. I remember one day I've been there watching the lake. I love this lake. And suddenly I understood why I'm a sculptor, and why probably sculpture continues to be so important in our life. Thanks to that image, I took the image immediately with my cell phone, because two birds just stopped on top of that pole coming out from the water. The water was moving, everything was moving, everything less the pole. And I thought, well, it seems sometimes that in sculpture today, it's just anachronic. It seems that today that everything is virtual, everything is so in movement, the speed is so important in our lives. Why to continue to build up heavy objects, physical objects, something that you can touch? And I guess it's because we still need places to relax, places to feel at home. This little corner that we love to be there, to release our fatigue. You can call that poetry, a wonderful poem. You can say a beautiful armchair where you feel comfortable and you close your eyes and you are yourself. But we continue to need places to be. And I guess sculpture is one terrific way to develop some of those places. Okay, that is also a very beautiful piece, I guess. It's my self-portrait, 7 times, with names of composers all around my body, music composers that I like, embracing trees. In the Middle Age, all the alchemists were dreaming about this idea that from the dead material, a new life was coming up, always. And I always loved the concept. I always loved the concept that you never die. In the way that from the mineral, from the dead material, from the earth, a new tree is coming up. The roots on the earth, the trunk as a bridge, and the branches embracing the cosmos. That was the concept of something that they call philosophical tree. And I like it to represent that idea from myself, embracing this kind of tree that I did in other places. This is a place in Germany, which is a permanent piece. And we are normally installing new trees, as you can see, is quite young, because the idea is to wait what the trees happen inside, because the tree continues to grow, not my body, let's say. And it's also a metaphor about soul and body, because the soul continues to grow up, even if our body gets fixed in a size, in a weight, in a measure. And I hope one day the tree will be bigger, my face will disappear inside, and life is much successful than a blocked material. And that is in Japan also, some of those figures watching the river. It's up in the north in Niigata. And that is another of the families that you probably also saw over here. My work with lettering. I'm permanently looking for boulders in the mountains that I use as a base. This idea of one stone, this idea that how strong is to think about one stone as a metaphor about the cosmos. Well, they said around the stone, they will have the temple, around the temple, the city, around the city, the country, around the country, the continent, etc., around the world, the universe. And this idea of a boulder, which is unique, I like to build up those kind of kneeling figures or sitting figures. And I'm working since many years with Latin letters or with the mix of alphabets in many others. This conversation is very similar, like the one that we have over here. And it's pretty beautiful when people are using the boulders as a place to sit and relax, because they become one more of my figures. No? I mean, it's pretty nice. That is another part of that work, when the body becomes architecture. That means our body, it's it's mentally a place where you invite others to come in. They said that the maximum idea of love is to disappear inside the other. Well, here I'm inviting normally people to walk through and to use this idea of human shape as a building, as a cupola. And when you are in, the world is completely different. And well, that was in Antibes, in south of France, that we installed a permanent piece. That is in Miami. Wherever you are traveling, you see the world through. And or in Grand Rapids, in Michigan, which is amazing, no? This sitting figure waiting for potential visitors, that is in Des Moines. Chatsworth, for example. And Moscow. Sorry. And that is the piece over here. You probably notice when you are up there that when you are inside the figure or in front of the figure, you have a beautiful view on the two heads facing each other. down below, and then all the landscape around. And I like it to imagine that that body is a little bit the center of the show, but not because the piece, it's because you, becomes the center. Because your eyes will see the complete installation around. And, it's a similar, wait a second, that piece you can notice is only with Latin letters. And that one which is in the center court of the Frankfurt University is a mix of alphabets. I'm using normally more or less 8 alphabets, which as a metaphor of the diversity of the world, which is Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, Russian, Hindi, Chinese, Japanese, and Latin letters. That was a very beautiful day. It was the opening day. It was suddenly starting to snow. It was like these glass balls with the snow inside, and it was just beautiful. That was in Vancouver. You see, it's always the back in Prague. And that is a piece that we installed last February in Houston, which is a group of 7 kneeling figures on top of boulders, just facing the city that the skyline is nearby. They are very mysterious and very, well, produce a certain quietness around, and people get silent when they are there. That is also a piece that I just installed last January in the entrance of the MIT in Boston. And I've been using, as the first time, the mathematical formulas and language. It's finally an alphabet in itself. And I enjoy very much, well, that is another view, the difference of size between, you see, it's wonderful numbers and little symbols. And now I'm working in a piece with music also for a museum in Cremona. Okay, that is in Boston. And that is a similar piece that we have over here. This idea of twins, duality, like in the Crown Fountain, the idea of conversation. I'm working pretty often about that. You and in front of a mirror. Actually, the piece that we have here is called a spiegel, this mirror, and over here. Okay, and it's also a mix of different alphabets. Okay, this afternoon we noticed that Jesus loved Henry Moore and Chips loved my word. And, because we were walking around and it was a piece of Henry Moore surrounded by geezers. And not a single geese in my word, only and okay, that was the beginning of this kind of portraits. When I did the Crown Fountain in Chicago, I've been filming in video 1,000 faces, and I like very much the potentiality of the portrait. In many books that they talk about concepts, they said that our face is the only part of our body made as a gift to others. That means because we cannot see ourselves, and it's a present, it's a gift to others. But you also know that they said that the face is the portrait of your soul. Well, it's many concepts around, but in any case, I have to say that the head, not only the face, it's probably the most important part of our body because everything happens here. And many times when in the brain, in the darkness, the humidity of the brain, two ideas wants to meet, even if you are not happy, they met. And many things could start at that moment. And always my curiosity was how it looks from inside, because we have a shape, but what's happening on the other side of the same shape? Like the letters in the book, to understand the back side of the letters, what is inside the head. And normally I'm working with the 3D programs in my computer, and as you know, the 3D computer is producing beautiful lines, virtual lines. And we really work very hard to try to pass all those virtual lines into physical elements. And we got it, and that was the first head, that it was in a museum in Valencia, was in the streets of Chicago. and that is in front of the Meadows Museum in Dallas, which is a permanent installation. And that is the piece that I finished for that show in Yorkshire. Probably it is a little bit the center, because when Claire and Peter came to my studio, it was not ready yet, but Peter immediately said, you have to finish that piece for the show, I guess could be the key. And I agree with him completely, because, well, you can see through, no, the ears. Here in my studio, that's my studio, it's more like a drawing. But when the piece is in the landscape, it changed completely, because the landscape gets in the head. You see? And it's, I guess, a very strong poetical concept that the landscape is inside our heads, our ideas. And I guess it's a very powerful message. That probably is the reason that we use that image for the cover of our catalog. Because probably conceptually, that piece is key. It's also in the roof of the underground gallery, that it's also conceptually very beautiful, because all the pieces that I display in the spaces below are installations. The curtain makes a kind of decision in terms of poetry, and on top we have those two faces thinking in conversation, but with the landscape inside. I think it's a very beautiful concept. Well, obviously in this park everything seems easier, because with those trees, look at the beauty of that tree. I mean, it's, oh, sorry. It's a piece that I did a little bit before, up in the north in Sweden, and it's completely surrounded by snow 8 months per year. And we decided to use as publicity of my show and the first images. We were using that because the concept is very similar. It's the idea of conversation with light and the landscape surrounding around. And that is the piece that we have also in the underground gallery. But when I show the piece in New York, why three? Well, you probably know that when Oscar Wilde was in prison, well, I love Oscar Wilde first. I love the letters of Oscar Wilde. I think he was so clever combining normal life with beauty, with ideas, with crazy ideas sometimes. And from the prison of Reading, he sent a letter to the authorities saying, I guess the three main problems in prison are hunger, disease, and insomnia. And I always like very much this so clear idea of hunger, disease, insomnia, because I'm not sure if it's only the problem in prison. I guess it's the main concern in our lives. And I guess it's a perfect description of our life. Hunger, disease, and insomnia. And I like it to do that conversation with those concepts etched on the face of those, you see? That is the one, disease, it's hunger, insomnia, and I develop others, desire, hysteria, other concepts that I guess are not far. But in any case, in this kind of impossible conversation, surrounded by pebbles, it's white marble pebbles. It's about 15 tons of marble pebbles that I still remember my gallerist in New York was get completely crazy. But I guess it's important, this idea like a bed, when you are blocked, and even if you lie, you could not move. And this idea of three heads illuminating the space, in that concept, it's well, very intense. Well, following that, we did this kind of room with 11 heads in alabaster. Since the Crown Fountain, I continue also the portraits using a very classical, let's say, or very traditional material like marble or alabaster. Instead that in Chicago I've been using video, here I thought it was interesting to carve really in a very traditional way. And we have the portraits of 11 girls. Well, not exactly 11, because some are repeat, but only girls. I'm working a lot with girls from 9, 11, 14 years old. And because I guess the future is female and the memory as well. And when a girl has this special age, she's not anymore a child, but is not still a woman. And I think it's a fantastic moment. They have a very special kind of beauty. Well, as I did in Chicago with the video, the heads are elongated in this particular way. I did that in Chicago. I scratched the images in the screen, and here I elongate the heads because I felt the material disappear. It's more like an idea, like a flame. And I'm using very often that shape. That is recently in New York as well, and another show in New York. And this fantastic portrait, always with the eyes closed, trying to emphasize the interior path. I think it's beautiful. That was a project that I did last year in Salzburg. It's in the entrance of the university nearby the Opera Festival. And it is, well, I like it to show you that it's the same girl, Aguilda. It's a girl from the Dominican Republic. That is the profile. That is the same girl. I like it. Well, I don't know if you know Salzburg, but it's a very Baroque city. And it's plenty of sculpture representing very important people. And I like it to introduce the head of a very normal girl coming from Dominican Republic looking for a better life. And in a big scale, in a place that is surrounded by very important historical people. Because the anonymous, I guess, is key in the evolution of cities and countries. And I build up the piece in marble, but in the way that Romans did the columns. You see, it's a kind of slabs of marble, and in between is a very thin layer of lead. And the lead helps to stick all the marble pieces all together. And also those horizontal lines make a very strange effect that it's almost transparent. You know? Even if the marble is very opaque and dark, it's getting very... Here's my portrait, saying goodbye to her when I was leaving. And that is the piece that I did 2 years ago in St. Helens near Liverpool, you probably know. And Saturn Maina was an important colliery, and when they canceled all the mining system, well, the little town were in a certain difficulty. And now, 20 years later, more than 20 years later, they are in a new economy and new ideas. It's a great town now. And they decided to transform the old mine into a public park. And with the help of the Liverpool Biennial, they asked me the possibility to collaborate with them in that way. And finally, I did the head. That is this young girl coming up from the hill. Well, you know, the tallest part of that hill is about, I guess, 89 meters from the sea level. And when you are there, you have an amazing view, a complete 360 degrees of the whole valley down. And the view is very beautiful from the distance as well. It's a little bit surreal. You see behind the trees this very magical head coming up in a very gentle way. You see, that is the M62. And thanks to the M62, it was not allowed for me to illuminate the piece in the evening because the authorities, the motorway authorities said, no, it's too dangerous. But thanks God, St. Helens people were insisting, and I guess it is just a couple of months ago, finally the piece is lit in the evening. I have not, unfortunately, still pictures, but it's working. I've got several images, fantastic in the evening. Okay, that is the piece, M62. That was the day of the opening. I love this shot because I'm there. It's the most dark. It's one over there. And yeah. And that is my last installation that I did in New York. Just the show ended last September 11. And it was at Madison Square Park. Obviously, you can see that I'm following the same concept. The girl in St. Helens were Anna, a very nice girl from the north of Catalonia. She's Nuria, is a Chinese girl born in Barcelona. It's the daughter of the owner of the restaurant, the Chinese restaurant nearby my studio. And she has an amazing beauty. And I thought it was an ideal idea for New York, this kind of mix of people. And I call echo, because you probably know echo, it's coming from the Greek tradition. It was a nymph that fell in love with Narcissus. And Zeus was angry because he also liked her, and he condemned her to repeat always the words of others, but not her own ones. And she was living in a cave, and that is the reason of echo. When you talk and something is repeating your words, it's because echo is repeating. And I guess we are living in a strange time that I'm never sure if when I'm talking with my own words, or I'm just the echo of somebody else. Because information is so tough, and sometimes we don't realize that maybe we are not talking anymore from ourselves, from inside ourselves. We're just repeating. And I like it to introduce that idea in our everyday life, and that is the reason of echo. But in any case, it's also beautiful. Look at how beautiful. And you probably remember that is the flat iron building, which is just in the corner of Madison Square Park. And the piece was a little bit in that direction. Somebody told me that maybe she was looking at the Statue of Liberty, but I'm not sure. I never checked about it. But in any case, it's quite beautiful, the site. Look, that is a nice picture that you can see the Empire State and the piece over here. And it's a very beautiful square because it's a lot of families living around. And it was great when, well, that in the evening is very beautiful. When people arrive in the afternoon, sitting around the piece, you see. And it's a very primitive concept in terms of sculpture. It's the totemic part of the piece sometimes, that it creates a center of gravity. And we just installed the piece one week ago, no, 2 weeks ago. And it was an amazing emptiness. When they took the piece out, I said, Mamma mia, what could happen? Because since April, the piece was there and was creating a certain identity for people to know where to sit, what to do. It was a circularity. Without the piece now, you don't know what to do, what to sit. Well, it's my opinion, obviously. Well, that's it.
Is that it?
That's it, yeah. Thank you. I forgot it was the last one.
Did you? There's a lot of other stuff as well, but these are the large works. Does anybody have any questions for Jaume?